We begin today in the Gemara on Daf Mem Amud Aleph, where it says Taime de Lulav. The first word on the line is Bain. The Gemara here is discussing the halacha that it said in the Mishnah regarding Shemitah, that if you're buying the Dal Minim from an Am Haaretz in the year Shemitah, so then you should get the esrik from him as a gift. Don't pay for it. The Gemara explained before that if you pay an Am Haaretz for the esrik, that money has the kedusha of Shemitah, and we're concerned that the Am Haaretz will misuse that money. But by Lulav, we don't have that concern. So the Gemara questioned that. What's the difference between Lulav and esrik? Seemingly, they both have the kedusha of Shemitah. And the Gemara answered, the difference is that regarding a Lulav, the status of the Shemitah is defined by when it began to grow. So in the beginning of the year Shemitah, that Lulav which began to grow in the 6th year is not part of Shemitah. Whereas the esrig, we define whether it's part of Shemitah or not according to when it was picked from the tree. And therefore the esrig was picked in this year of Shemitah, and therefore it is part of Shemitah. That's a distinction. But the point is that the Gemara is saying that the status of Shemitah applies to a Lulav and to an esrig. The only difference in our case is regarding the Lulav and esrig, whether we go basa lekita or basa chanata, as the language of the Gemara before was. So the Gemara now is going to question this whole premise here. Is it really true that the halachas of Shemitah, the kedusha of Shemitah, applies even to a Lulav? Let's see inside. Sagt the Gemara, Taime, the only reason why in our case there's no kedusha of Shemitah for the Lulav bar shishis hanichnas l'shviyasu. Because this Lulav is from the 6th year entering into the 7th year, and we follow the beginning of when it grew, and therefore it's not part of Shemitah. The Shviyas, but if it would be a Lulav that grew in the year Shemitah, Kadosh, then it does have the Kedusha of Shemitah. The question though is, Amai, why is that so? Eitzim ba'almahu, the Lulav is merely wood. It's not a fruit, it's not food, it's just a wood. The Eitzim, ein b'hem mishum kedusha shviyas. The halacha regarding wood of Shemitah is that the kedusha of Shemitah does not apply to wood. The Tanya, as we learned in Abraisa, alei konim, the leaves of reeds, v'alei gefonim, the leaves of vineyards, shegavavan lechuba al panei asada. He gathered them to store them in the field. So he's storing it. Now, what is he going to use it for? So lokdan lachile, if he gathered it in order to store for food for animals, so then yeshbem kedusha shviyas. Then the kedusha of shviyas does apply to these pieces of wood, because even though it's not for human consumption, but it's being used lachila even for the behemoths, the kedusha of shviyas applies. Lokdan leitzim. However, if he just gathered it for wood to be used in an oven, to burn in an oven, to have a fire, so then ein b'hem mishum kedusha shviyas, the kedusha of Shemitah does not apply. So we see clearly in this braisa that there's no kedusha of Shemitah for wood that's not used to eat at all, not for a human, not for animals. So the lulavim, which are not being used to eat, so why is there any kedusha of Shemitah at all? So the Gemara answers, Shani Hasam, over there, regarding that braisa, regarding the wood that was gathered for eitzim, for wood to be used in an oven, that's a different story. The Amakra, because the Torah says as follows, Lachem, the full pasuk is, V'haisa Shabbos ha'aretz, Lachem la'achla. So what do we learn from this pasuk? Lachem la'achla means, so this pasuk is, as we'll see here in the Gemara and on Rashi, we're going to learn two different things from this pasuk. One thing we're going to learn from this pasuk is the produce of Shemitah that has Kedusha, how is it supposed to be treated? What are you supposed to do with it? That's number one. But what we'll also see from the pasuk is which produce has Bechlal, the Kedusha of Shemitah, and which doesn't. So first, let's start with the first point. V'haisa Shabbos ha'aretz, lachem la'achla. That the produce that comes from the land, what should you do with it? It should be lachem, and it should be la'achla. It's yours to eat. So the pasuk is sort of saying two things. It's saying lachem, which means it's yours to use, to have your benefit of it from whatever you want. But then it gives a limitation, la'achla, that it's only for eating it. So therefore, we interpret this as follows. Lachem, you can do with it whatever you want, as long as dumye de lachila. If the benefit you're having from it is similar to the kind of benefit that you have when you eat something. And similar in what sense? Mi shahana asay ubiyuroi shaveh. In other words, that your benefit and the consumption of it is happening at the same time, just like when you eat something. As you're eating it, the food is getting consumed, you're also having benefit from it. That's the way you should treat the Kedusha of Shemitah, to eat it and to consume it at the very same time. So therefore this excludes wood. Shana asan acha biyuran. How is wood used? So wood you put into the oven and you light it on fire and then it turns into charcoal. And only after it's consumed and it's already fully charcoal, then it creates the heat that you need for the oven to cook in it, and then you have hana from it. So the hana, the benefit that you have from this wood, and the beer, the getting rid, the consuming of the wood does not happen at the same time like when you eat. So therefore, that's not the way you use the things of Shemitah, items of Shemitah that have Kedusha. That's what it comes to exclude. So Rashi explains, just like we see over here in this pasuk, that it tells you how one should use the food of Shemitah, that it must be hana'asan and biyuran at the same time. We also learn from here regarding which items that grow in the field during Shemitah does b'chlal the kedusha of Shemitah apply to. When we read the pasuk v'hoisa Shabbos ha'aretz lechem lo'achla, we also read the pasuk as regarding what does the Shabbos ha'aretz, does the kedusha of Shemitah apply if it's something that's used in this way of lechem lo'achla, that you have the benefit and you consume it together at the same time. But if it's an item where that the consumption of it and the benefit of it is not at the same time, so then there's no Shabbos ha'aretz. The kedusha of Shemitah does not apply to that item in the first place. So over here regarding this wood, since the wood is something which is used in the oven only after it turns into charcoal, so the hana comes after the biur, so the kedusha of Shemitah, the Shabbos ha'aretz, doesn't apply to this in the first place. So that's the reason why in the Braisa, when you gather the wood for the oven, it says that there's no kedusha of Shemitah b'chlal. Now Rashi explains, by contrast, when it comes to lulav, our question was that the same should apply to lulav. When it comes to lulav, so in those times, what was the use of a lulav? How did they use a lulav? So we had before in the Gemara, when you had a lulav that the leaves were torn off of it, what was it used for? It was used as a broom. So therefore, when you use a lulav as a broom, the benefit of the lulav and getting rid of the lulav, consuming the lulav, is happening at the same time. When you broom with the lulav, you're having the hana of it, and that also sort of destroys the lulav, that gets rid of the lulav. So therefore the hana and the beer is at the same time. So therefore a lulav, the way it's used, is different than the wood that's used in an oven, that the hana comes of it only after it turns into charcoal. So therefore there's no comparison of the two. But the Gemara asks over here regarding the wood, that we said that by the wood the hana and the beer is not at the same time. Fragt the Gemara, but you have wood that's being used for light. That's Rashi's pshat. Mishchan over here means it's like when you use wood, mishchan is oil. Just like you use oil and you light a candle for the light. So the same thing also when you light wood on fire and you're using the light of the fire, so then the benefit that you're getting from the wood is not after it turns into charcoal. It's while it's burning and you have the fire. So the hana comes at that very time of the beer, of when it's burning. So therefore you have wood that the hana and the beer is at the same time. So why is the Braisa saying that if you gather the wood in the field to burn as firewood, that it's not going to be a part of the kedusha of Shemitah? According to Taisus, according to Rabbeinu Hananel, mishchan refers to using it as wood to heat up in the fireplace. So then also you use the wood for while it's burning, while it's on fire. That's when you have the hana at the same time. The hana son of biyur and shava. So then the hana and the beer is at the same time. So Rave answers, stam eitzim lahasake hein oimdim. Stam, most woods, and therefore we say the status of wood in general is to be used in the oven for cooking, and there the benefit of the wood is only after it turns into charcoal. So therefore this is the status of all woods. When you gather wood and you're storing it in the field for future use, even though we don't know b'pile what you're going to be using it for later, but since most and stam wood is used after it becomes charcoal in the oven, so therefore that's the status of all the wood, that it does not have the kedusha of Shemitah because it's an item which the hana and the beer is not at the same time. So therefore, we don't make any distinction regarding wood. There are some Rishonim that say that this answer of Rava, stam eitzim la'asake noimdim, is actually an answer also regarding lulav. And according to the maskana of the Gemara, this concept applies to lulav as well. Even though it's true that a lulav is usually used as a broom, and over there the hana and the beer is happening at the same time. But since stam wood is made to be used in the oven as charcoal, where the hana and the beer is not at the same time, so a lulav will have the same status, and therefore be'emes, by a lulav there is no kedusha of shmita. And therefore, according to this answer of Rave, the Gemara is retracting what it said before, that the only distinction between the lulav and the esrig is regarding that it grew in the 6th year, and by the lulav we follow the status of the previous year, and by the esrig we follow the status of the year that it was picked in. But according to this final answer of the Gemara, it's saying that by lulav we follow the status of stam wood, and there is no kedusha of shmita b'chlal. That's the pshat according to some Rishonim. But from Rashi it seems that this answer of Rave is only an answer regarding the question that we were asking regarding the wood that's being used for light, for the light, or the wood that's being used in the oven. But regarding the lulav, we remained with the point that we said before, that because it's used as a broom, the hana and the beer is at the same time, and the kedusha of shmita does apply, as the Gemara said before. This is very relevant actually today as well. To using the lulav, the aravis, the hadassim from Shemitah. Does the Kedusha of Shemitah apply by them? I mean, regarding the esrig, definitely the Kedusha of Shemitah applies, as we see over here. And there's all kinds of halachas regarding the esrig. It has to remain in the field, hefker, and then the way you have to use it and so on. You can't just dispose of an esrig of Shemitah the way you usually do if it comes from Eretz Yisrael. But when you get to lulav and esrig, lulav and adassim and aravis, there's a big discussion in Paiskim whether the kedusha of shmita applies to it. I mean, that's the discussion is based over here on the maskan of the Gemara. What does the Gemara mean when it says that there's no shmita by lulav? Is it like what Rav says, or is it like what the Gemara said before? And even if it's based on the point that the Gemara said before, which Rashi explains is because a lulav is used like a broom, but in today's day and age, people do not use a lulav as a broom. People use a broom for a broom, not a lulav. So the question is whether that concept even applies today. It's a big discussion. I'm not sure what the consensus in the Paiskim actually is, but this is over here going to be relevant next year actually, when we'll be after the year of Shemitah, and you'll have the lulavim and so on that came from the year of Shemitah. Even though I believe most lulavim today do not come from Eretz Yisrael. They come from Mitzrayim or from Spain and so on. Sagt die Gemara, ve'eitzim la Sukkah. This concept that we just said, that the eitzim, the wood that's used to heat an oven, and therefore the hana and the beer is not at the same time. The hana comes after it's already nisbayir, after it was burnt and turned into charcoal. Tanoi, this concept that in such a case there is no kedusha of shmita, this is a machlokes tanoim. The Tanya, because we learned in Abraisa as follows: Ein meisrin peiris shviyes, you're not allowed to use the peiris of shmita, loy lemishra, not for soaking in it. So, for example, if you have any liquid that came from fruits of shmita, wine or things like that, and you want to soak in it something, Rashi says you soak the flax in wine in order to help it afterwards be used to be able to make clothing out of it. V'loy lekvusa, and not to wash clothing with it. These are kinds of uses that you're not allowed to use with the produce of Shemitah, as will be explained in a moment. Rabbi Yosi says, Meistrin, yeah, you could give it to be used for this purpose, for soaking and for washing, it's not a problem. So the Gemara explains the machlokes, and here we'll see the machlokes Tanoim regarding what we said before. My time at the Tanakama, so what's the reason for what the Tanakama says? The Amakra, because the Torah says by Shemitah, as we quoted before, lachem la'achla, that la'achla, the way you consume the produce of Shemitah that has kedusha, is for eating. V'loy lemishra, v'loy lekvusa, and that excludes that it should not be used for soaking flax in it or for washing clothing in it. That's the Tanakama. My time the Rabbi Yosi. What does Rabbi Yosi say? Amakra lachem. Rabbi Yosi says, it says la'achla, but it also says lachem. What does lachem mean? Lachem, l'chol tzarcheichem. That you can use the produce of Shemitah for any of your needs. Even in this way, not only for eating, but also for washing, for soaking. Ba'afil l'mishra l'kvusa. So that's the machlokes. As I mentioned before, you have over here in the pasuk, it says on one hand lachem, mashma you can use for everything, and it says la'achla, which mashma limitation, only for eating. So that's what they're arguing about. So now the Gemara will explain, but how does each one of these Tanoim explain both parts of the pasuk? Frek the Gemara, v'tanakama, and according to the Tanakama, haksiv lachem. The Torah says lachem, which seems like you can use it for whatever you wish. So why is he focusing only on the word la'achla? So the answer is, like we explained before, Hahu lachem dumye de la'achla. When it says lachem, what it's saying is, yes, you can use it for whatever you want, as long as it's a similar kind of benefit to when you eat it, which is mi shana asay ubiyure shava. Only if the benefit and the consumption of it is happening at the same time. Yatsu mishra kvusa, and therefore that excludes soaking flax or washing garments. Shana asan acha biyuran. The hana comes after the beer. And Rashi explains the reason is because you soak it or you wash it. And when does the hana come? The hana comes when you take that flax and you make a garment out of it. So the hana only comes when you wear that garment, or after you finished washing the garment and you wear it. But the beer, when do you ruin and destroy the produce of Shemitah, the wine that you're soaking it in? When you're soaking, that's when it becomes ruined. That's when the beer is. So the beer is first and the hana is later. That's Rashi's pshat. Tosfos says the fact that the hana is later is not because the hana only comes when you wear it, but the hana is later because as soon as you place the flax or whatever garments into this wine or into this liquid from Shemitah, it immediately becomes spoiled. You can't use it anymore. But the final product of it soaking fully or being washed fully doesn't happen until maybe 2-3 days later. So it doesn't, the hana of it, before even wearing it, but even the hana of washing or soaking doesn't happen until much after you place it into the liquid. So therefore the hana and the beer is not at the same time. That's the pshat of the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Yosi, according to Rabbi Yosi, haksiv la'achla. Rabbi Yosi focuses on the word lachem, that is, you can do with the produce of Shemitah whatever you want, but even according to Rabbi Yosi, it does say la'achla, that limitation, that it has to be similar to the way you eat. So what does he learn from that? Ahu, that word la'achla, mibayalei, he needs it, he learns from it as follows. La'achla, you use the produce of Shemitah for eating. What does it exclude? V'loyle melugma, but not for a remedy. Don't use the produce of Shemitah to make a remedy or a medicine out of it. That's not allowed. Kedetanya, as we learned in the Braisa, la'achla, when the Torah says la'achla for eating, v'loyle melugma, not for a remedy. Atay melachla v'loyle melugma. And this Braisa spells out, you're saying that the word la'achla comes to exclude a remedy. Oyein ela v'loyle kvusa. Maybe la'achla means to exclude more, to exclude that you even shouldn't use it for washing or for soaking, like the Tanna Kama said. So the Braisa here continues and explains, Kishoim melachem, when it says in the pasuk lachem, for all your needs, harei lekvusam, that includes even for washing as well. So hamani mekayim la'achla. So therefore I say, when the Torah says the word la'achla limiting to eating, la'achla v'loy l'melugma. La'achla is only coming to exclude a remedy, but it's not coming to exclude washing and soaking, because that's included from what it says lachem. No, but the Braisa now explains, why from lachem are you including that it includes whatever you want to use it for, even washing? And when it says la'achla, you're specifically excluding, not using it for a remedy. In other words, what's unique about a remedy that dafka that is something that is excluded? So the answer is, I include even washing sheshave b'chol adam. This is a kind of need, a kind of benefit that all people equally have this benefit. But then I exclude using it as a remedy, which is not something which is needed, which is equally needed by all people. Only someone that's sick, that needs a remedy, that's what the melugma is. So therefore, when the Torah says lachem including everybody, I include all kinds of uses that all people usually use for. Whereas la'achla is coming to say that if it's something which is not for all people, then that's something that I exclude. And therefore I dafka exclude a melugma, a remedy. So what do we see over here? The same achloikus that we had before regarding the firewood, not really the firewood, but the wood that's in the oven, and the hana comes after the beer. And the machlokes was whether the kedusha of Shemitah applies to that or not. Because since the hana comes after the beer, so the Shabbos ha'aretz does not apply to that. I have that same machlokes here between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yosi. So as Rashi here explains, similar to what Rashi said before, even though the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yosi are arguing about how it should be used, how the produce of Shemitah should be used based on the pasuk lachem and la'achla, but there's also a second drasha in the pasuk, v'hoisa Shabbos ha'aretz lachem la'achla. They're also arguing regarding which produce does Shabbos ha'aretz even apply in the first place. If it's something that's generally used in an oifen of lachem la'achla, according to the Tanakama, hana and beer shave, then the kedusha of shmita even applies in the first place to this produce. And according to Rabbi Yossi, no, even if the hana comes after the beer, the kedusha of shmita still applies, as long as it's something that's not going to be used in an oifen, that it's not shava v'chol b'nei adam. Only there the kedusha of shmita doesn't apply. But if it's something that the hana comes after the beer, the kedusha of shmita still applies. There are two drashas from this pasuk, as we explained before. So over here as well, I see this machlokes of the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. Sagt the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said this is a related halacha regarding shmita. Even though we're not really in the sugi of Shmita here, but Bashkacha Pratis, we're going into a year of Shmita, so the Gemara here brings up another subject regarding Shmita. Ein shvius mischaleles elo derech mekach. The halacha of shvius mischaleles, which is that you have the fruits, the produce of Shmita, and to transfer that kedusha of the fruits onto money. That transfer from the fruits onto the money does not happen only if it's derech mekach, which means you bought the produce, so the money that you paid for this produce, then I say that the kedusha goes on that money. If you bought it, derech mekach. Now, first, let's just clarify one point there, as Rashi here says, and we see it later in the Gemara. Usually, the term mischaleles means that you're transferring, that there was the kedusha on one item, and you're transferring that kedusha to something else, and the kedusha where it was in the original place leaves and goes to the new place, in this case the money. But over here the term mischaleles, as Rashi says, means litfais damel b'ktushasa, which means that the kedusha of shmita on the fruits remains. You can't remove that. But when you sell the fruits of shmita, so the money you paid for it becomes kaddish as well, and I have the kedusha of shmita both on the peiros and on the money. So what the Braisa here is saying is, or who is this speaking here, Rabbi Elazar saying is, that the kedusha of shmita, when it's extended, not really transferred, but extended, that it should also go on to the money. When does that happen? Only derech mekach. If you bought produce of shmita, then the kedusha that stays on the peiros as well goes on to the money that you paid for it as well. Not derech chilul, as the Gemara will soon explain. Derech chilul would mean, usually when you have hektish, and you want to transfer money you want to transfer the kedusha from where the hektish is onto something else, so you mechala, you take money and you say that the kedusha that's on this should be exchanged with this money, and then the kedusha gets transferred to the money. If you're going to do the same regarding shmita, you're going to have produce in front of you, and you're going to say, I want the kedusha to be transferred, to be deconsecrated with this money. The money over there will not get any kedusha. The kedusha will stay in the peiros, and the money will not get the kedusha of shmita. The only time the money gets the kedusha of shmita is when you buy. When you buy the produce of shmita, then the money gets the kedusha. That's the point that Rabbi Elazar is saying. But Rabbi Yochanan argues and says, no, bein derech mekach, bein derech chilul. Whether you bought the produce of shmita, the money will go on to the kedusha, that is, will go on to the money as well. And also derech chilul, the way it's usually done when you're machalal, the produce of hektish. So if you're going to say that the kedusha should go from the fruits to this money, the money will become kaddish as well. The fruits will remain kaddish, and the money will become kaddish as well. So the Gemara brings the source of this machlokes, my time at Rabbi Elazar. What's the reason of Rabbi Elazar's opinion? Because the pasuk says, "B'shnas hayovel azayis v'gaymer." It's discussing the halachas of shmita and yovel, and v'samech lei, the parsha right afterwards is v'chisimkuru mimkar, that if you sell something to your friend, and it talks about the halachas of a sale. So the pasuk is a hekesher. The two parshas of shmita and halachas of mechira, of mekach come together in the Torah. So therefore, I learn out from this derech mekach that the halacha of shmita, that the money becomes kaddish as well, as only when you bought in a sale, but not by derech chilul, just by saying that I want to bring the kedusha of the shmita, of the fruits, onto the money, it doesn't go. Rabbi Yochanan, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, my time, what's his reason? D'chsev ki yovel hi kodesh. Yovel is a time of kodesh, an extra pasuk. What is it telling me? That yovel is kodesh. So ma kodesh, we're comparing it to hektish. Ma kodesh, just like by hektish, bein derech mekach, bein derech chilul. By hektish, the money that you're going to redeem hektish with will become kaddish with the kedusha of hektish, whether it was done through derech chilul, which is just by saying that I want to exchange the kedusha from the hektish to this money, or derech mekach, whether you sell something for hektish for the money, so the money becomes now hektish. As Rashi here brings the psukim, that by hektish, either way, the money becomes hektish. Hav Shviyas, the same thing is also by Shmitte, bein derech mekach, bein derech chilul, whether you sold the produce of Shmitte, whether you just said that you want to bring the Kedusha of Shmitte onto the money, either way, the money becomes Kaddish with the Kedusha of Shmitte. But now the Gemara will explain how each of these Ameiraim interprets the source that the other one said. Rabbi Yechanan, according to Rabbi Yechanan, this hekesh that the Torah puts the halachas of Shemitah and Yovel together with the Mekach and Memke, what does he learn from this hekesh here? He learns from this the statement that it says in the Braise, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said. Tanya, we learned in the Braise, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Bo Yirei, come and see Kama Koshe, Af Koshel Shviyas v'chulu. How harsh it is, someone that's over on Shemitah, even in a light thing, something that's called avak, like the dust, even something very light in the halachas of Shemitah. Adam, neisav and neisim, bepeidah shviyas, a person that does business with the fruits of Shemitah, l'saif, meicheres metaltla veskelov. In the end, he's going to come to a position that he's going to have to sell his items, his kalim, Shenemar, as we see here in the pasuk. First it says b'shnasa yevel azayis teshuvu el chazasai, talks about the halachas of Shemitah and Yovel. V'samach lein, right afterwards v'chisimkuru mimker lamisecha v'gaima, that if you have to sell something to your friend, that's what happens if you do business with the produce of Shemitah. That's why the Torah puts it together. Ve Rabbi Lazar, Hai karad Rabbi Yochanan ma Yavedle. Rabbi Lazar, this pasuk that Rabbi Yochanan brought, where it says Yovel is kodesh. What does he learn out from that pasuk? He needs this to teach me, like it says in the Braise. Ki Yovel hi kodesh. What is the Torah saying that Yovel is kodesh? Ma kodesh teifes es damav. Just like by hektish, the kedusha of hektish could go on to the money that you're exchanging it with as well. The kedusha could be transferred over to the money. Af shviyas tefeses is the mouth. So too by Shemitah, the kedusha of Shemitah will go over to the money. But as I said before, by Shemitah, the kedusha does not leave the original place of the peiros where it is. It just goes over to the money as well. That now the peiros will be hektish, or they have the kedusha of Shemitah, that is, and the money will also have the kedusha to it. So I learn out from this is the source where I learn out that there's this concept that the kedusha of Shviyas could go over to the money as well. Tanya kivasei de Rabbi Lazar, v'Tanya kivasei de Rabbi Yochanan. There's one braise where it says like Rabbi Lazar, and in another braise it says like Rabbi Yochanan. Tanya kivasei de Rabbi Lazar. We learned like Rabbi Lazar in this braise here. It says Shviyas tefeses is the meha. The produce of Shemitah will also, the kedusha will grab hold in the money as well. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ki yovel hi kodesh tia lachem, ma kodesh teifes as damav. Just like by hektish, the kedusha of the item of hektish could go over to money as well. V'aser, and it's also for you to use it like it's hektish. Af shviyas tefeses as the me'av asura. The same thing also by Shemitah, the produce is not limited. The kedusha that is not limited to the produce, but the kedusha could also go over to the money. But now the Gemara clarifies the point that I said before. This is a braise actually. Ma kodesh, you would think to say, just like by hektish, teifes damav, the kedusha goes over to the money, v'yaitze l'chulin, and the original item of hektish goes out to chulin. You redeem it, or you sell it, so it goes out to chulin. Af shviyas, I would say the same thing regarding Shemitah. Tefes, says the me'ah, the kedusha goes over to the money, v'yaitze l'chulin, and the original item of Shemitah goes out and becomes chulin. Doesn't have the kedusha of Shemitah anymore. That's not the case. Talmud loimet tihiyeh. Therefore, the pasuk by Shemitah says tihiyeh b'havyasa tehei. The original produce of Shemitah remains in its status that it has the kedusha of Shemitah. Elamai, it remains there, and it also goes on to the money. Both now will have the kedusha. Okay, the Braise describes what happens. Lokach bepeiris shviyas. If you went and you bought with the produce of Shemitah basar, you bought a piece of meat. Okay, so in exchange for the produce of Shemitah. Elu ve'elu mizbayir and b'shviyas. They both have the kedusha of Shemitah, the original produce of Shemitah, and the meat that you bought with it will also have the kedusha of Shemitah. And they both have to be used up, consumed in the year of Shemitah, like the halach is regarding produce of Shemitah. Okay, the Braise continues now to describe further what a person could be doing here and where exactly the kedusha of the Shemitah will be. Lokach bebasa dagim. What if the person then goes and with this meat that he bought with the produce of Shemitah that has the kedusha of Shemitah in it, so now he went and he bought with this meat, he bought fish instead. So then what happens is yatsa basar, the meat does not have any more the kedusha of Shemitah, v'nichnesu dagim, and instead the fish have the kedusha of Shemitah on it. If he goes further, lokach bedagim yayin, then for that fish he bought wine. Yotzu dagim, the fish don't have the status of Shemitah anymore. V'nichnas yayin, now the wine has the status of Shemitah. Further, lokach beyayin shemen, if the person bought for the wine, he bought oil, so yotza yayin, the wine loses its status of Shemitah. V'nichnas shemen, and the oil has the status of Shemitah. So what's the rule here? Ha keitzad, achrein nichnas b'shvius. The very last item that you bought in exchange for the produce of Shemitah, that's what has the kedusha of Shemitah. Everything in between does not. Upri atzma yaser, and the original produce of Shemitah also always remains in its status that it's aser with the kedusha of Shemitah. So the original item and the very last, everything in between that you exchange, does not have the kedusha of Shemitah. That's the rule. But now what do we see in this brayse? Midiktani lokach, the brayse keeps on using the term lokach, that you bought. You bought with the produce of Shemitah, the meat, and then you bought fish, and so on. Alma derech mekachin. So we see that to bring over the kedusha of Shemitah from the produce to money, or in this case to the meat, or in the end to the oil, that's only by buying. Derech mekach, in a way of buying. Derech chilul loy, but derech chilul, just by saying, the way you usually do by hektish, that I want to exchange, I want to take the kedusha from the produce of Shemitah and bring it over to money or to another item, just by saying that, not in a way of a sale, it will not be effective at all. So this is a brayse that says, like Rabbi Lazar. Tanya Kavah say that Rabbi Yochanan, in another brayse we learned like Rabbi Yochanan, because it says here as follows: Echad shvius, whether you have the produce of Shemitah, the echad meiser, whether you have the produce that you took meiser from it. In other words, this is meiser produce, meiser sheni. This is produce of meiser sheni. Mischalelin al beheme chayev va'oif. You can be mechalel them. You can exchange and bring the kedusha of it onto another item. Onto what? Even onto a beheme chayev va'oif, onto animals, onto birds. Ben chayin, whether they're alive. Ben shchutin, whether they were already slaughtered. Doesn't make a difference. You can bring over the kedusha of Shemitah or the kedusha of the meiser onto them. Divrei Rab Meir. That's what Rab Meir says. But for Chachamim say, al shchutin mischalelin, only if they're already slaughtered, then you could bring over the kedusha of Shemitah or the meiser sheni to them. Al chayinei mischalelim. But if it's still live animals or live birds, you cannot bring over the kedusha of Shemitah or the meiser sheni to them. Why not? Because what we are concerned is that since these are live animals or live birds, you may keep it alive and then let it breed and have a whole stock of animals, a whole herd of animals, or a lot of birds, and you may use it in the future outside the year Shemitah, which is not allowed. You're supposed to consume it within the year Shemitah. And Rashi brings a similar halacha applies regarding the meiser, that you're supposed to eat the meiser in the year that meiser is from. Or at least you use it up. The beer of the meisers comes at the end of the third year. We have to be mevayed, and you don't want it to be kept for a long time later. So therefore, Chachamim say that there's a gzeira, that if you're going to bring the kedusha of Shemitah or meisers onto live animals or live birds, you may keep it as herds of animals or birds for later on. So that's the gzeira here. But the point is, what do you see in the lashon of this brayso when it speaks about Shemitah? It uses the term of mischalelin, to be mechalel. Just like it uses benigay to hektish, not derech mekach, even just chilul, which is Rabbi Yechanan's opinion, that when you want to bring over the kedusha of Shemitah onto money or onto another item, it doesn't have to be only derech mekach. Even just by saying that you're transferring it from Shemitah to another item, the kedusha goes over to the money as well. That's the brayse like Rabbi Yechanan. The Gemara explains the case of when Rab Meir and Chachamim are arguing here. Amar Rave, so Rave explains, Machloikis b'scharim. The only time they're arguing about whether there's a gzeira, that you can, about bringing over the kedusha of Shemitah or meiser sheni to animals, to live animals, is if it's scharim, if it's male animals. So over here, because these male animals are not giving birth on their own, so therefore there's less of a concern that the person will use it and then he'll have from it a big herd of animals later outside Shemitah or outside the time allotted to eat the meiser. Aval ben Akavis, If it's nekevis, if it's female animals, divrei akoil, there everybody will agree, al shchutin mischalelin, al chayim me mischalelin. That only for slaughtered animals, slaughtered female animals, are you allowed to deconsecrate it, are you allowed to bring the kedusha on them, and not on live animals. There everybody will agree that there is a gzeira that you may use it to give birth and to then have a lot of animals later. The only machlokes between the Tanakama and the Chachamim actually and Rab Meir here is regarding Scharim, whether there was a gzeira on Scharim as well to be similar to the Nekevis. But regarding the Nekevis, everybody agrees that this gzeira applies.